So welcome everybody to this latest video on 162 Maths, and in this video we'll be continuing with the theme of going through some big mark questions taken from some past higher GCSE Maths papers. Now, as always, I'll include a copy of the questions for you to download and have an attempt at before watching through this video as we go through the answers, so you can see how many marks you'd attained without any help. So looking at the question breakdown of the sixth question we're going to go through in this video, you can see that we've got quite a nice mix of different questions, and also that there isn't really much crossover in some of the questions that involve more than one topic, and you do tend to find that they do go quite hand in hand with each of those topics. So similar area and ratios is quite common. Vectors and geometric vector proof again will go hand in hand, and circle theorems and geometric proof again go quite hand in hand. So let's get started on these questions. So question 1 says, here are two similar cones, and it says the surface area of cone A is 2 square meters and the surface area of cone B is 4.5 square meters, and the question is saying that to work out the ratio of radius A to B in the form of 1 to n. So for this, the key word in regards to this particular question is that the two cones are similar. So here we're given the surface area of each of those two shapes, so we can then work out what the area scale factor is going to be. So the area scale factor is going to be the area of the big shape over the area of the small shape, and that, I don't know why I've put 2.5, it's just 2 and 2, giving us an answer of 2.25. so that means that the length scale factor, which is what we're wanting because the radius is a length, is going to be the square root of 2.25, which is 1.5. So then if the radius of A, which we don't know, would be 1, let me just put A there, then the radius of B will therefore be 1 times 1.5, which would be 1.5 centimeters. So then the ratio then is going to be of A to B, and the ratio there is going to be 1 to 1.5. Now moving on to question 2, it says in the diagram, I've got this diagram and I want to show that d to x equals 1/4 A plus 3/4 B. Now with these types of questions, you always want to make sure that you're either going to make a bold choice of whether you're working with fractions or decimals. Now if you're working with decimals, then this, what I'm wanting to show, is the same as 0.25 A plus 0.75 B. Now I'm going to choose to work with fractions just because it allows me, just in case it's a non-calculated question. Now the way to get from d to x from the diagram is I need to go from d to e, and then I'm going to go from e to x. Now you could go from d to h and then h to x, it's entirely up to you, but it's just the route that I've chosen to go through. Now d to e is just a, so I can leave that going with the arrow. So in order to work out e to x, I first of all need to work out what e to h is going to be. So e to h, to go from e to h, well, to get from this point to this point, I need to go against the arrow to get from e to d and d to h. So e to d is minus a and d to h is positive b. Now using this first ratio, I know that this is got equal to 4 parts. Now e to x is 3 parts and x to h is 1 part. So 1 part is going to be this divided by 4, so that's going to be minus 1/4 A plus 1/4 B, and 3 parts is going to be minus 3/4 of A plus 3/4 of B. Now from this I can then work out what d to x is, because e to x is this here. So then if I do minus 3/4 A plus 3/4 of B, simplify all of this, I get 1/4 A plus 3/4 B, which is what they wanted me to show. Now moving on to question B, it says, is dxf on a straight line? Well, for these types of questions, you always want to state, well, how are you going to prove that they are a straight line? So if dxf is on a straight line, then dx must be a multiple or a factor of xf. So what I need to do is I need to find these two things here. Now this here is taken from part A, and so that is a quarter of A plus 3/4 of B. So what I need to work out is xf. Now to find xf I need to return back to my diagram, which is just here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to label some of the parts. So this blue length here going in this direction, e to x, is minus 3/4 A plus 3/4 of B, and x to h is minus 1/4 A plus 1/4 B. Now to work out x to f, and let me just write this as B, so x to f, what I need to do is I need to work out what e to g is. So e to g, now e to g is going to be minus A going against the arrow and then plus 9b. Now using this fourth ratio, I know that e to g represents 4 parts. Now e to f is going to be one of those parts, so it's going to be minus 1/4 A plus 9/4b, and f to g is going to be 3 of those parts, so that's going to be minus 3/4a plus, and it's going to be 3 times 9, which is 27/4b. Now f to g I don't need to worry about because I just need to go from e to f, x to f. So x to f is going to be x to e plus e to f. Now x to e is going to be going against the arrow, so that's going to be positive 3/4 A minus 3/4 B, and e to f, well, I've worked that out, is going to be minus 1/4 A plus 9/4b. Now if I collect all of those like terms together, so here I've got 3/4 A minus 1/4 A equals 1/2 A, and minus 3/4 B plus 9/4 B is going to leave me with 6/4 B. So x to f equals this. Now going back to what I was proving, so if I just remember that, well, I know that this is 1/2 A plus 6/4b. Well, if I write them one on top of the other, I've got d to x, which equals 1/4 A plus 3/4 B. I've got x to f, which is 1/2 A plus 6/4b. So then what do I need to do to get from this to this? Well, I've got to times that by 2, and I times this by 2. So therefore, as dx, or 2dx equals xf, dxf lies on a straight line. And excuse my spelling for straight. Right, so otherwise you could say you could also go along the lines of that dx equals 1/2 xf. That would have been absolutely fine, both mean the same thing. Moving on to question 3, it says that A is equal to 4.72 to 3 sig fig, B is 158 to 3 sig fig. Work out the upper bound of A over B. Well, first things first, what you want to do is work out the upper and lower bound for this. So that's going to be 4.715 to 4.725, and for B we're looking at 157.5 and 158.5. Now, with these questions, always important that you do write the upper and lower bounds, even though we're only going to be using one of them. Now, to get the upper bound of a fraction, we want the biggest numerator over the smallest denominator. So that's going to be using this, or not that number. It's going to be using, and let's put that 7 back in. It's going to be using the biggest a and the smallest b. So then working this out, it's going to be equal to 4.725 divided by 157.5. And if I type that all into my calculator, I get an answer of 0.03, or you can write it as a fraction of 3/100. Moving on to question 4, it says ABC are 3 points on the circumference of a circle with centre O. BD is equal to CD are tangents to the circle. ABDC is a kite, and angle BDC is X. And the question is asking us to prove that the angle ABO is 45 minus a quarter X. So looking at this from the diagram and knowing that OB and OC are radiuses and CD is a tangent as well as BD, then these angles here are going to be 90 degrees, which means that this angle here is going to be, and plus this angle X is going to be add up to 180. So this angle here is 180 minus X. Now, because we know it's an arrowhead, we can then work out that this angle here is going to be half of this, which is 90 minus a half X. Now, if I turn this arrowhead into two triangles, then we know that this triangle here is an isosceles triangle because AO and OB is the radius of a circle, which means that this angle here has got to be the same as this angle here. Now, what's that blue angle? Well, that blue angle is half of this angle here. So therefore, that ABO equals 90 minus a half X divided by 2, which equals 45 minus a quarter X. And there is my final answer. Moving on to question 5, it says that a country park, there is a house, a museum and a garden. The table shows the prices per person to visit the park. On one day, 480 people visit the park, 67 visit the garden only, 40% visit the house and museum, 3/8 visit the house only, and the rest visit the museum only. In total, how much do the 480 people pay to visit the park? And you may use the Venn diagram to help. So we know that all the numbers inside this Venn diagram have to add up to 480. Now it's already written that 67 is outside, so that's there. So then what we need to do is we want to work out what 40% of 480 is. Now to do that, just got to multiply 0.40 times by 480, and that gives me an answer of 192. So this middle section is 192. Then I want to work out what 3/8 of 480 is, in which I just type into my calculator 3/8 multiplied by 480, and that gives me an answer of 180. So then from this I can then work out what area this is by taking away all those other numbers. So I've got 480, take away 180, take away 192, take away 67, which leaves me with an answer of 41. Now from this I can then work out the prices I'm going to be collecting. So the garden, there are 64 people, so that's going to be 0 times 67. For this, the house and museum, I've got 192 times 1250. For the house only, that's going to be 180 times 8. And for the museum only, that's going to be 41 times 7. So then from this, all I've then got to do is calculate each of those. So 0 times 67 is 0. 192 times 12.5 is 2,400. I've then got 180 times 8, which is 1440, and 41 times 7 is 287. So then all I've got to do is add those numbers up. So go 2400 plus 1440 plus 287, and it comes up to a grand total of £4,127. Then moving on to our last question, it says that A, B, C, D are junctions on a motorway. The distance CD is 3 times the distance of AB, and the distance BC is 25 miles. Salma drives from A to C. She drives 30 minutes at an average speed of 62 miles per hour. Work out the distance of AD. Well, A to C, well, I know that B to C, that this blue line, if I just draw that out, is 25. So A to C, well, I can work that out by doing distance, speed, time. So the distance is basically the speed, which is 62, multiplied by the time in hours, which is 0.5, and that works out to be 31 miles. So all of this distance from A to C is 31. So then I can then work out what A to B is, and that's going to be 31 take away 25, which is 6. Now, using the ratio, they've told me that the distance of CD is 3 times the distance of AB. Well, if AB is, let me just write this down. So if AB equals 6, and that's from 31 take away 25, then C to D is going to be 3 times 6, which is 18. So then now I know all 3 distances. Probably pink is probably the wrong choice of colour. So A to D is going to be 6 plus 25 plus 18, which gives me an answer of 49 miles.